What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Wednesday, August 20th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Late start today. Had some stuff going on this afternoon, but getting a show in. Obviously, not as much time for you guys to catch up on it, but hopefully you're catching it live and it'll help you out tonight. Going to go game by game, as always, talking about tonight's slate on DraftKings, looking at DraftKings pricing, matchups, etc. Take a look at what my player exposures would look like if the slate started right now as well. Most of this, obviously, from an analysis standpoint, carries over to FanDuel also, but pricing, of course, is different. Rosters are different, so it will be more applicable to DraftKings, but a lot of the stuff, particularly hitting matchups, will carry over as well if you play on FanDuel. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in chat. Hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you get alerts when shows go live. We will be having a lot more content in the near future with NFL kicking off. Have plenty of shows planned for NFL, everything from showdown shows to classic slate shows, possibly some projections shows as well. So subscribe to the channel. I think that you will enjoy it. And speaking of NFL, link is in the description below for our NFL packages at Run the Sims. Use promo code EARLYBIRD, get 15% off, and that discount is good for as long as your subscription is active. We will not charge you more as long as that subscription is active in the future. So take advantage of that. That is good until August 31st. Early Bird gets you 15% off. These are, we have a package for basically, I think, everybody. We have a package catering to single entry, 3 max players, people that are just looking to aggregate projections. We have a Sims package. We have a Sims package where you can also add on Shady Advice's portfolio manager if you play a lot of lineups and you think that'll help you out. We have a standalone props package if that's all you're interested in. So take a look. The link is in the description below. I think there is something for pretty much everybody that is looking to play NFL DFS and or bet NFL props this upcoming season. So check that out. Getting into it here, we have the White Sox taking on the Braves. Overall, this is a very ugly pitching slate. Our highest projected pitcher on the slate is coming in at 16 DraftKings points. I've seen even lower than that in other places. It's pretty flat in terms of projection. You know, as you can see on the screen, there are a lot of pitchers that look very, 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 very similar, but there's not much in the way of top-end pitching, quote-unquote safe pitching, although lately top-end pitching has been absolute garbage anyway. No matter how good you've been, for the most part, you've pitched like shit for the last 3 weeks. But there's not even anybody on this slate that can make us incorrectly feel good going into the slate. So it is one where I think in general you'll pay attention to ownership a little bit more because there are so many players that look similar, but also that does tend to just lead to flatter ownership and flatter player exposures when you don't have anybody really running away in terms of top projected pitching plays. But I will get to all of that. So starting here with the Braves taking on the White Sox in Atlanta. Doesn't look like we really have any weather concerns tonight either, so that's nice. We do have wind blowing in hard in the Milwaukee and Chicago game, but no real rain concerns, it doesn't look like, at least as of right now. So in this one, Atlanta, about a 5 to 5.5 total, taking on the White Sox, who come in with a total around 4. For the Braves, we have Hurston Waldrop on the mound. For the White Sox, we have Martin Perez. No real interest in Perez here. He is $7,300, so he's relatively expensive for Martin Perez's skill set. The matchup against the Braves isn't great. Definitely interest in Waldrop, though. $8,700 price tag. Right now, only projected for 12% ownership. I'm getting to 23%. I'll go ahead and say that I do think my ownership projection is probably a little bit low here. I do think in general that my ownership projections are very good and that they do a pretty good job of accounting for where players are going to get steamed because industry sim tools think that they're under-owned, etc. But where they will tend to miss is on pitchers that don't necessarily project really well, but have done well. And so you have somebody like Hurston Waldrop, who has only made 3 starts this season with the Braves, but he's gone 5 2/3, 6 and 6 innings. He has scored 19.75, 24.5, and 29 DraftKings points, and he's facing the White Sox. The Ownership projection, again, only coming in at about 12%. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like 1.5 to 2x that, and you get somewhere around like 20% ownership coming into Waldrop because of partly recency bias. And then also you get him facing the White Sox, which is a matchup that can kind of, people are happy to click anyway. And then you look at the game logs and they look really good. So I will probably bump that ownership projection on him going into the slate. I think that it's probably too low, but either way, I think he looks pretty good here at 8,700 in this matchup. As I mentioned before, you don't really have top end pitching to pay for. You don't have super highly projected pitchers on the slate. So it does make these mid-range guys look a bit better. Waldrop, 19 starts at AAA this year, 91 2/3 innings pitched. He struck out 22.5% of hitters, projects to be around like a 21% strikeout guy rest of season in the majors, probably a 4.4, 4.5 FIP. He's not likely to live up or to continue posting the numbers that he has through his first few starts so far, but it is a good matchup overall, even though the White Sox have been hitting well. He looks pretty good. Again, I think the ownership probably comes up a bit. Maybe pushing like 20% or so. But I do think Waldrop looks pretty good here. Through 12 innings pitched so far, he does have a 110 stuff plus grade. So that is something that is driving our projection is a little bit higher than other places I've seen in the industry. And that is probably because of how good his stuff has graded out so far. I know that's something that does factor into our projections. And when you have a pitcher with a small sample size, it does carry a little bit more weight in general. So that is a difference between us and some other places in the industry that still have him projected reasonably well, but not quite as highly. They are more reliant, at least as far as I know, or as far as I can tell, on basically just purely like algorithmic regressed projections to someone's minor league numbers, which is fine. It's still going to be good. But for us, we have that, but then also are factoring in how stuff has graded out. So that is getting us a little bit higher on Waldrop here. So again, I think he's fine. Probably a little bit overpriced relative to talent level on a normal slate, but on a slate where pitching just isn't that good, I think he looks pretty good here. Getting to the bats, starting on the White Sox side, I don't have too much interest here. I'm not really getting to much of anybody with the exception of getting to Miguel Vargas again. He's projected for 8% ownership. I'm getting to 15%. He is still 3K. He is still first base and third base eligible. He is batting second. He has like a 175 to 180 expected ISO against right-handed pitching this season, 177, 340 expected WOBA. It's just a cheap, relatively low-owned value piece that you can get to. We don't have much data yet on Waldrop. He has allowed a 163 expected ISO to righties compared to sub 100 to lefties through his first 3 starts. That is clearly not a big enough sample size to draw any conclusions. But one thing I will point out about him is going back to his time at, I believe, Florida. He was, if I remember correctly, known for his splitter, and that is the pitch that he's thrown the most to lefties, and it is a pitch that generally, not always, but generally plays better against opposite-handed hitters. So I wouldn't be shocked if we do see reverse splits, at least to some extent, going forward for Waldrop. Clearly not set in stone at this point, but you know, if you needed one more small data point to maybe have some interest in Vargas, he is a right-handed bat here against Waldrop, but mostly with Vargas, it's just getting there because he's cheap and multi-position eligible. Jenna said there are 3 or 4 DFS shows going on right now, but I choose you because you're the smartest, and I love how you break down the pitchers especially. I appreciate you giving your time to doing this. Definitely appreciate that. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I do generally try to avoid this time slot because I know that there are so many shows going on, but figured getting a show in for however many people wanted to watch it was better than just skipping it when I wasn't around earlier. Definitely appreciate you guys checking it out. I know there's a lot on right now. Moving over to the Braves here against Perez. Pretty solid matchup against him, and you are getting a lot of ownership coming into Atlanta. 19% projected ownership coming into Acuna, 10 to 15% to most of the rest of the lineup. Albies, Ozuna, Olsen, Murphy, Profar, and then around 8 to 10% to Harris, Alvarez. So pretty popular Atlanta team. They've been very good over the last couple of games. That's certainly not going to do anything to dissuade people from clicking them into their lineups either. For me personally, I'm getting around half the field on just about everybody, but clearly this is one of those spots where it looks good. Martin Perez is not a particularly good pitcher. The Braves have a lot of good bats in their lineup. They are affordable as well. There's only one hitter priced above $5K, and it's $5,400 Ronald Acuna. Acuna, $5,400 for him historically is a pretty low price tag as well. So they look good. I understand why they're getting ownership. They're a good value stack. They are one of the higher team totals as well. You can make good Atlanta stacks. Absolutely. It just so works out that for me personally right now, I happen to be choosing a subset of lineups that doesn't have a ton of Atlanta, but clearly a good stack to get to. They project very well. They're affordable. They're in a good spot against Perez. This season, Perez has barely pitched. But if you go back to last season, 207 expected ISO to righties, 151 to lefties. You're going to prefer righties against him, as you would expect. But a reminder that Matt Olson does hit left-handed pitching extremely well. If you are stacking the Braves, you can go there. You're not really getting an ownership discount, most likely. I think people are still just going to go to Matt Olson, but he does hit left-handed pitching extremely well. Michael Harris is still batting fifth despite the lefty-lefty matchup, and he is still 3,400. He is hitting the ball very, very well of late. You're seeing him get back to doing damage at the plate like you expected before he had a horrible start to the season. Aggressive Goose said, any lean on how deep into the game Perez is going to go? We have him projected to face 19 to 20 batters. So we have him projected for essentially a full workload here, which is, kind of nice. He threw 66 pitches last time out. That was his first start since April 18th. I assume he's probably throwing somewhere around like 80 pitches or so here. So like if he's pitching well, I would guess he gives you something like 5 innings. If he's not pitching well, obviously he's probably not going to stay in the game very long. But I assume you're asking from a Braves standpoint, like, do they have a good matchup against Perez for long enough? And if that is what you're asking, I think so, because like, obviously, if you're getting to that like top end of Martin Perez going 6 or 7 innings, he was pitching well. And so it doesn't really matter what the leash is. And it's not a situation where I think he's going like 2 innings and it's going to the bullpen, or 3 innings and it's going to the bullpen. I think that you're probably getting something like 5 innings of Perez unless he gets knocked out of the game earlier, which for Braves purposes is certainly plenty. Yankees taking on the Rays in Tampa after hitting 900 home runs last night against Shane Baz, who I had a lot of, unfortunately. It was obviously a dangerous matchup, but did not go my way. Here we have Drew Rasmussen going for the Rays. We have Cam Schlittler going for the Yankees. $7,700 price tag on Schlittler, $8,100 on Rasmussen. 14% ownership coming into Rasmussen, 7 coming into Schlittler, which seems a little bit low to me. I'm kind of surprised because he is cheap. He has shown good stuff so far. It's not an easy matchup, but I'm a little surprised he's not getting more ownership. I'm getting to 15% Rasmussen. I'm getting to 19% Schlittler. I've said it on shows before, but this applies to Schlittler. It applies to Waldrop from that first game. A lot of times, if I do have this like 2 to 3 times the field exposure to somebody, it just means that I'm a little low on the ownership projection. But also, obviously there are plenty of pitchers people could play. Somebody's going to come in around 7%. So maybe a little bit low on Schlittler. Maybe he comes in at like 12, 13. But either way, like on a slate where pitching is flat, I have no issue taking a chance on the stuff that you're getting from him. 29 and 2/3 innings pitched for him so far this season. 23% strikeout percentage is solid. 117.8 stuff plus grade. Probably not going to stay there, but to put that in context, it's better than Tarek Skubal's stuff plus grade. I'm not saying clearly not saying he's better. I'm not even saying he has better stuff. I think it probably comes down. But the point is, the stuff has been very, very, very good for somebody that is $7,700 on a slate full of pitchers that are mediocre to kind of good. So I am interested in him in tournaments, absolutely. And if the ownership projection does stay relatively low, I like it even more, even though it's obviously not a safe matchup. I do think that the upside is very high. I think that the stuff has been very good so far. You've seen solid strikeout numbers, although the strikeout percentage is certainly lower than you would expect from somebody with that stuff plus grade, which again, it's just likely that the stuff plus comes down at least somewhat. But he is a highly regarded pitcher, and the stuff has absolutely been there so far. We have seen reverse splits from him so far. 26% strikeout percentage against lefties compared to only 20% against righties. 102 expected ISO to lefties compared to 292 to righties. It's a small sample size. Like I said, 29 innings pitched, but that is something that is at least noteworthy to keep an eye on. Maybe something that I would care a little bit more about if we had better pitching options on this slate. But it's definitely a slate where, for the most part, I'm fine just kind of saying like, yeah, okay, the guy's stuff is good. I'll take my chances. Kind of similar to Boz yesterday on the other side, which obviously did not work out at all. But we don't have a Tampa Bay lineup yet, I don't believe. It is likely that we get a pretty balanced lineup here. The top of the order likely to be more righty heavy with Ha-Seong Kim, Yandy Diaz, Caminero, and Pereira. And then the bottom of the order probably a little bit more lefty heavy. But that is something, I guess, to keep in mind when that Tampa Bay lineup does come out. If they were to load up on lefties, then you probably see then Schlittler maybe looks a little bit better, at least based on what we've seen so far in the majors. But mostly it's still small sample size. I'm not going to read into it too much. I'm mostly just going to go with the fact that he has shown very, very good stuff so far and hope for the best. For Rasmussen, he is generally very good at limiting power, which of course is important against the Yankees. He does also have reverse splits though, which is it's exactly what we saw from Shane Baz yesterday when he got absolutely torched. Granted, he pretty much got lit up by everybody, I think. But Rasmussen this season, 143 expected ISO to righties, 129 to lefties. So that is different than Baz in that Baz gives up more power to righties than Rasmussen does, but Rasmussen does still give up a little bit more power to righties than he does to lefties. Where you see the really big split for Rasmussen, though, is only a 17% strikeout percentage against righties compared to 27% against lefties. Yankees have a pretty balanced lineup today. 3 lefties in the top 5, 3 lefties in the top 6, 4 lefties total. So there's not like a big lean one way or the other, but that is something to just keep in mind. He is likely to have an easier time striking out guys like Grisham, Bellinger, Rice than he is Judge or Stanton, especially Judge. Stanton kind of strikes out a lot regardless, but you do have those big reverse splits again. For the bats here, starting on the Yankee side, I am getting to them tonight, which I wish this were last night, obviously. Aaron Judge getting 9% ownership. He's in 15% of the lineups I built. 15% Jazz for me at 6% owned. 14% Rice at 6% owned. I was getting to McMahon, who is not in the lineup, so obviously that can be ignored, along with Austin Wells. That can also be ignored. I'm getting 9% Bellinger at 4% owned, 8% Volpe at like 3% owned. So I am getting over the field on the Yankees. Didn't have Stanton in the projected lineup, but that's another bat that I would think I want to get. If I'm going to the Yankees, I certainly want to be getting to some Stanton, given the reverse splits that Rasmussen does have. But if you're going to the Yankees in general, you're just banking on a team that has a lot of good power hitters in a park that you can certainly hit home runs, and they're mostly projected to be like 5-6% owned. Judge getting about 10%. But you can, sort of just take advantage of this being a slate where you do have the Dodgers in Coors Field. The Yankees are relatively expensive. You have the Braves likely to get more ownership than the Yankees. Their team total is like a half run to a full run higher. They offer a little bit more value. So it naturally just kind of keeps the ownership down for the Yankees. Aggressive Goose said Wait, did the Yankees switch their lineup? Oh, I didn't refresh from yesterday. That makes a lot more sense. I was wondering why the projected lineup I was looking at for Tampa Bay was like their lefty lineup, was their lineup against lefty. So we do have a Tampa Bay lineup. You do have, yeah, okay. So ignore everything I said about lineups. The Yankees have their lefty heavy lineup. So that's good for Rasmussen strikeouts. Grisham, Rice, Bellinger, Jazz, Dominguez, all hitting in the top 6. And then you also have McMahon and Wells. So Aaron Boone just being extremely Aaron Boone-like and not paying attention. So yeah, I hadn't refreshed my lineups page from yesterday. They did go with the lefty-heavy lineup, like chat is pointing out. That is good for Rasmussen's strikeout numbers. So like I said, I am getting to the Yankees, but I do like that lineup for Rasmussen's upside as well. And then we do actually have a Tampa Bay lineup also. You have Simpson leading off. You have Lau hitting 3rd. You have Lowe hitting 5th. You have Fiducia hitting 7th and Seymour hitting 9th. Mangum also hitting left-handed. So you have 6 lefties / switch hitters that will be hitting left-handed in the lineup for Tampa Bay against Schlittler. So if Schlittler's reverse splits are real, the Tampa Bay lineup is very good for him. And then Rasmussen, that really big K percentage against lefties, looks good for him too. So neither of these managers are either buying into the reverse splits or they're both just asleep at the wheel. But it does increase upside, I think, for both pitchers from a strikeout standpoint. But you are still in a park that is good for hitting. You do still have offenses that have power. Looking at Tampa Bay, I'm not getting to as much of them as the Yankees, not even really close right now. I have 7% Caminero. I have 3% or less of everyone else. For the field, you're getting about 9% ownership to Caminero, 9% to Simpson. Obviously, he comes with massive stolen base upside. Brandon Lau getting 7%, Josh Lowe getting 5%. So 5 to 10% ownership on the best hitters in the Tampa Bay lineup. There is upside there, but I do prefer the Yankee side just because I think there is a little bit more upside for them just in the talent that they have. I want to check, since they did come out with that lefty-heavy lineup, I want to take a look at Tampa Bay's bullpen and see how pinch hitting looks. The Rays have 3 lefties in their bullpen. One of them threw 62 pitches yesterday, so he's not pitching today. The other 2 did pitch yesterday, but they only threw 18 and 19 pitches. I assume they will both be available. So you are going to have some pinch hit risk. We can take a look in our projections right now. 18% to Fiducia, 22% to Seymour. Other than that, nothing too problematic up here. Chandler Simpson is relatively low. Brandon Lau is relatively low. Mangum's a switch hitter. Josh Lowe is relatively low. No pun intended. So the 2 guys with the biggest pinch hit percentage, at least they're batting 7 and 9. They're probably not the guys that you were most interested in getting to anyway. So that's nice, at least on the Tampa Bay side. On the Yankee side, nothing too high over here. 11% to Austin Wells is the high mark. So nothing too concerning. We did have Stanton projected in, so let me refresh. Because Stanton being out should increase the pinch hit risk for lefties in general. But Dominguez is a switch hitter. So yeah, there's still nothing too high. You have Wells at 11%, Dominguez at 12%. The thinking on Dominguez here is probably like if he does come up in a big spot and there's a lefty pitching, you get Giancarlo Stanton probably, but it's not like an automatic pinch hit necessarily because Dominguez does switch hit. So nothing too problematic in the way of pinch hitters there. Nothing, certainly nothing that I would be like manually docking or removing from my player pool or anything like that. A's taking on the Twins in Minnesota. Bailey Ober going for the Twins. JT Ginn going for the A's. I feel like I get to more Bailey Ober than I want on pretty much every single slate. At least today, there's not a lot of opportunity cost, but it is happening again. $7,100 price tag is not helping matters because that is just really, really cheap. He's projected for 20% ownership. I'm getting 37% right now. It is a scary matchup against the A's. They have power in their lineup, but it is also a good strikeout matchup against the A's. Ober has seen a big drop-off in terms of strikeout percentage this season. Last year, he struck out 27% of hitters. This year, it's all the way down to 18% in 108 and a third innings pitched. He has maintained his stuff plus grade pretty close to last year. His command is down from last year, but has still been a little bit above average. So, I've talked about it before. He's kind of similar to like Tanner Bybee. His strikeout percentage is even lower than Bybee's this year, but he's kind of similar in that you do have the big strikeout drop-off, which is the most important thing. We're far enough into the season that is the biggest predictor of what he's going to do going forward in strikeout percentage. But at least the stuff is still similar to what it was in the past. The command is still not horrible, as opposed to somebody like Brandon Pfaadt is always like the counter example I use, where his strikeout percentage is down, his stuff sucks, and his command sucks all of a sudden. So at least you're getting kind of a mixed bag with Ober. And when you get the price drop to 7,100, I'm still willing to go there because that's a price that is clearly factoring in that he's been a below average strikeout pitcher this season. So I'll take my chances. Again, a lot of pitchers look very similar on this slate. He's certainly one of them. The lineup for the A's, Kurtz leading off, Langeliers, Rooker, Soderstrom, Butler. Basically the same lineup as yesterday. I think it is the same lineup as yesterday, but I am actually looking at the right day this time. So you still have, same thing I was talking about yesterday. Like Nick Kurtz, great hitter, will strike out. Brent Rooker, very good hitter, will strike out. Relatively low strikeout percentages for Langoliers, for Soderstrom. You get 24, 25% for Butler. Hernandez is very difficult to strike out, but he's also a below average hitter. Urias is a average to below average hitter. He's tough to strike out. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but most, or at least a couple of the most dangerous hitters on the A's are high K guys at least. So you do get that for Ober. Very, very volatile spot, I think. But the fact that he is cheap is still getting him into lineups here. He has struck out 15.6% of lefties this year, 21% of righties. He's allowing power to both sides, 210 expected ISO to lefties, 225 to righties. Honestly, I hope that I'm getting to A's bats in my non-Ober lineups, but because I think this is just really a boom or bust spot where there are strikeouts. He is cheap. There's not great pitching on the slate, but also he could just get fucking rocked by all of the power bats in this A's lineup, especially 1 through 5. That is a very, very difficult 1 through 5 for somebody that doesn't miss a lot of bats and doesn't do a good job of limiting the quality of contact against him. On the other side, 16% ownership coming in to JT Ginn at 5,800. That is a very, very cheap price tag. I'm getting to 9% against him. The Twins lineup is very lefty heavy, and that is very important to note here. It doesn't mean, obviously, that like he can't pay off 5,800 or that he's going to have a bad start. But if this were a right-handed heavy team, I would want like as much as I can possibly get. So far this season, JT Ginn, 521 pitches thrown to righties, 436 thrown to lefties, 33.3% strikeout percentage to righties with a 259 expected WOBA, 152 expected ISO. Lefties have only struck out 17.3% of the time, so that's 20 points lower than his strikeout percentage against righties. They have a 385 expected WOBA. That is like 130 points higher than his expected WOBA against righties. They have a 223 expected ISO. That's like 70 points higher than his expected ISO to righties. Again, at 5,800, I don't really care what hand hitters hit with that he's facing. He's a reasonable value option. But if this were a righty heavy lineup, it would just be unbelievably good. Whereas now it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, he's a breathing starting pitcher that is cheap. And generally, you do expect splits to, when they're this drastic, to even out at least a little bit going forward. Like if you have the ability to strike out 33% of righties, your stuff's probably good enough that you're going to end up striking out at least somewhat higher than 17% of lefties, or, you know, the numbers against righties are going to come down. But with the lineup you're getting from Minnesota, where the only righties in it are Byron Buxton and Ryan Jeffers, it's about as lefty heavy as you can get. So still projects reasonably well point per dollar wise, but I would just be jamming him in like every lineup I could if this were a righty heavy lineup. For the bats here on the A's side, I am getting to them at least somewhat, which I am happy about. 5 to 10% projected ownership to most of this lineup. Nick Kurtz getting 10% ownership is my highest owned A's bat. I obviously love that. I'm getting to 19% of him at 5,900. I'm getting to 19% Langoliers at 5,600. I'm getting to 13% Rooker at 5,300, 9% Soderstrom and Butler, 7% Urias, 6% Harris, and it goes down from there. But very, very happy that not only am I getting to the A's over the field in this very volatile spot, but I am getting to the ones that I actually want to get to. It's not like I'm just getting to the cheap guys at the bottom of the order. The A's that I'm getting to, like their power numbers against righties, remember, as I said with Ober, he gives up power to both sides of the plate. He has below average strikeout stuff to both sides of the plate. Nick Kurtz, 363 expected ISO against righties. Langoliers is at 218. Rooker's at 243. Soderstrom's at 218. Butler's at 167, but also has stolen base upside. Those 5, 1 through 5, all legitimate power bats, particularly 1 through 4, but Butler has power also. I just really like the matchup for them. I like the price. I would say that I like the price for Ober and I like the matchup for the A's. So it is a spot where, all things considered, even though the A's aren't particularly cheap, I like getting to both sides here because it's kind of difficult when you think about what Ober struggles with and what the A's have at the top of their order. It's kind of hard to envision the scenario where Ober isn't at least decent for 7,100 unless the A's have players that you want. Like, obviously, you could just get a game where the A's are getting a bunch of singles against him, and it's not good for him and it's not good for the A's. Like, obviously, that can happen, but this is just such a the A's strength is Ober's weakness spot, that it does elevate the chances, I think, of either Ober is solid for 7,100, which is just a cheap price tag, or he gives up multiple home runs to a team that just has massive, massive power, at least at the top of the order. So I really like the way I'm getting to this game, that matchup in general. On the Minnesota side, I'm getting to them a bit as well, not as much as the A's, but I do have 13% Brooks Lee, 13% Clemens, 11% Buxton, 7% Keyshaw, 6% Jeffers. I missed Keyshaw when I was talking about the right-handed bats. So they have 3 right-handed bats. I kind of wish that I weren't getting to the 3 right-handed bats as within my top 5 hitters, but obviously those are 3 of the best just overall hitters on Minnesota. So still, if I'm stacking them, I'm going to want to go there. For Clemens, you are getting him from the left side. He's only 3,100, batting 5th, first base outfield eligible. He's getting 10% ownership along with Buxton, 7% to Lee, 8% to Keyshaw, 6% to Jeffers. I'm mostly around the field here, slightly higher on Brooks Lee. But the A's power bats are my favorite hitting spots of this game. Texas taking on Kansas City in Kansas City, about a 4 to 4.5 total for both of these teams. Noah Cameron on the mound for the Royals. For the Rangers, it is Caleb Bushley, who I don't know exactly how deep he's going to go into this game. I don't think he's going to go deep enough that I'm interested. He is only $4,000. He has made a handful of starts at AAA this season, but he pitched 2 days ago. He went 1 inning. He went 1 inning in his most recent AAA outing prior to coming back up from the minors. So he hasn't gone more than 1 inning, and I think it's 10 or 11 days. He just pitched, like I said, on the 18th. So we have him projected to face 9 to 10 batters, go 2, maybe 2 1/3 innings. I think that's very reasonable. He could go more, but the fact that he just pitched the other day and also had only gone 1 inning in his most recent AAA outing makes me think that he probably is skewed a little bit more towards the low end. It's obviously not a good strikeout matchup here. I am not getting to him. This is the kind of slate where if you had a 4K pitcher that maybe was going to go 4 innings, you could probably talk me into it because you have the Dodgers in Coors Field. You don't have great pitching on the slate. But at the same time, you do, even though you don't have great pitching, when you think about the opportunity cost, you do have an abundance of guys that just project for 13 to 16 points. There's a very good chance a couple of those guys are going to put up big enough scores that you're not going to get by if you get 8 points from a 4K pitcher or something like that. So long way of saying I don't think I'm going there, even though he's only 4K. 8% ownership coming into Cameron at $9,000. I'm getting the 5%. The matchup here against the Rangers is fine. It does help that Corey Seager is left-handed, so you're getting the lefty-lefty matchup there. Seager hits lefties well, but still obviously prefer getting a lefty pitcher against him. Other than that, you have an almost entirely right-handed lineup, other than the very bottom of the order, Evan Carter hitting left-handed. I've talked about Cameron before. I think he's a fine pitcher. I think he's kind of just an average guy. The problem with him in DFS, outside of the fact that he's just not a great strikeout pitcher, he has a 19.7% strikeout percentage this season. The problem with him right now in DFS is that he has a 2.47 ERA compared to 4.17 xFIP. The 4.17 xFIP, I think, is very much in line with what you expect from Noah Cameron. And that 20% strikeout percentage is more or less what you expect from him. But because he's been so good at run prevention, it drives up his salary, and that's why he's $9,000. But there's no reason to think that he's just going to continue to be a 2.5 ERA guy for any amount of time into the future. So you are overpaying for his talent level. He is still a competent pitcher that's going to be relatively low owned. There's nothing, there's no rule that just because he's been lucky up until this point, he has to stop being lucky today. Obviously it can happen and he can give you a good score. He's in 5% of my lineups, but he's somebody that if you throw a $7,500 price tag on him on this slate in this matchup, I'd be pretty happy to go there. But you put him at 9K, you put him in a park where it's tough to get strikeouts. You are overpaying to be different. Jenna said, I checked earlier, and I think Cameron's better against lefties. Is that true? It's been somewhat true. He has a 19.5% strikeout percentage against righties. He has a 20% strikeout percentage against lefties. He has allowed more power to lefties, 180 expected ISO to left-handed hitters, only 127 to righties. He does have a changeup. He's thrown 23% of the time to right-handed hitters. It has about a 20% swinging strike percentage, which is pretty good. It hasn't allowed too much power. It's been a pretty good pitch for him. So he is somebody that is, I would call it more like splits neutral, but because the sample size is still small, at least to lefties, you'll probably just see that expected power number to lefties come down a little bit, and the expected power number to righties probably go up at least a little bit. But he does have a pitch that explains why he would be neutral or reverse splits. He's also thrown a cutter 22% of the time, a curveball 19% of the time. Those are all pitches that tend to play pretty well against opposite-handed hitters. So he does have an arsenal that you would expect to at least be serviceable against right-handed hitters. So I would say like splits neutral, maybe a little bit reverse splits. He's not like good against righties, at least in terms of strikeouts. He has been good in terms of limiting production, though. For the bats here on the Texas side, I am getting to a few of them, mostly. 13% Wyatt Langford, 12% Marcus Semien, 9% Corey Seager are my three highest owned guys here. And then it drops off to 5% or less on everybody else. That's kind of what the field is likely to do as well. 10% projected ownership to Semien, 7% apiece to Langford and Seager, and then 5% or less to the rest of the team. I don't love the park for power upside. I do like the upside in general, though, that you get from those three guys. Like Langford, 4,100 with power and stolen base upside. Seager, 4,500 is just too good of a hitter to really ever be 4,500. Semien is cheap and 3,600 and hitting third. So 1 through 3, I think, is fine. Higashioka is 2,900 batting cleanup at catcher. Like if you want a cheap catcher that has some power upside, there is some value in the Rangers. It is an average pitcher in Cameron. But, like Jenna pointed out, and like I was saying, you do have somebody that is probably at least solid against right-handed hitters. I don't think it's a great matchup overall. Kansas City on the other side, kind of a bullpen game, which isn't super appealing. I think you're likely to get Jacob Latz as the follower behind Bushley. 10% ownership coming into Bobby Witt, 8% apiece to Perez and Garcia, 5% or less to everyone else. For the first time in my life, I'm actually not getting too much of Kansas City. I have 5% Witt, 4% Garcia, and it goes down from there right now. Clearly, if you want to play Bobby Witt Jr., if you want to play Garcia, those guys are fine. But I don't love the bullpen game. I don't love the park for power upside when you have a game in Atlanta, you have a game in Tampa, you have a game in Minnesota, you have Coors Field, you have Angel Stadium. Like there's some good home run spots / matchups on this slate. And then you get Kansas City, which is good for scoring runs, but it's not good for hitting home runs. So again, clearly Bobby Witt's great, gives you stolen base upside too, but it's a spot that I'm not getting to quite as much as the field right now, personally. Milwaukee taking on the Cubs in Chicago. As I mentioned at the top of the show, wind is blowing in heavily here. This is one that I think I might end up bumping or adjusting projections a little bit. Jacob Mizorowski, $9,300 price tag, getting 14% ownership. Colin Ray, 11% ownership at 6,700. I'm not getting to either one. I would like to, at least a little bit, and I think I will end up changing that. Joe Ross said the YouTube title says the 19th. It's the 20th. Yeah, I apparently forgot to change the title, so appreciate that. But yes, this show is for the 20th. So this is one where you can kind of just ignore my player exposures. I will probably be manually adjusting this game a little bit just to get a little bit more pitcher friendly. We do factor in the wind and weather in our projections, but I personally tend to move Wrigley games a little bit more when you have Wrigley wind games. So Mizorowski, obviously you're getting a high strikeout upside. You don't have a good matchup against the Cubs. It's a tough team to strike out. They have good hitters, but Mizorowski, has been overall very good this season. Did have the blow up start. But overall, a 35.7% strikeout percentage, 120 stuff plus grade, 301 xFIP in 34 innings pitched. I think that 14% ownership is very reasonable for him. And the 11% for Colin Ray, I don't have a problem with either. It's not an ideal matchup against Milwaukee. They don't have a ton of strikeouts in their lineup, but Ray's just cheap enough at 6,700 that if he gives you 5-6 innings, especially on this slate, and can limit the runs to, like a couple of runs with the wind blowing in, that's probably good enough. 18.8% strikeout percentage, 4.39 xFIP. That's similar to Noah Cameron. It's similar to Bailey Ober. He's just the guy, but he's one of the cheaper ones So I think the ownership on those pitchers is fine, even though I'm not getting to them at the moment. And then I am getting to some of the bats right now, but again, I think that'll change between now and lock. No real ownership coming into Milwaukee. 3% Sal Frelick is the high mark. Even without adjusting projections right now, I am getting to them not too much. I have 6% Frelick and 5% or less of everybody else. They do have the better matchup, obviously, against Ray, but they also have the less exciting hitters. If you're going to this game, if you're saying, screw the wind, I'm just going to play low-owned, high upside bats, the Cubs are going to be the side that's more appealing there, even though their matchup is more difficult, just because you have unowned Kyle Tucker, PCA, Michael Busch, Suzuki, Horner, like literally all projected for 2% ownership or less. And so right now, those are actually, particularly Tucker, PCA, and Busch, the guys that I would be getting to. But again, I am going to end up lowering their projections at least a little bit. They are relatively expensive. It is very, very difficult to hit home runs here when the wind is blowing in like this. But one nice thing to keep in mind with the Cubs, although again, the matchup does suck, they have a lot of power. They will also steal bases. So that is why they've been one of the highest upside teams in general this season. They're not completely home run dependent. Like, yeah, home runs are great, but you also do have those outs, even if they're not hitting home runs, that they steal once they get on. You can absolutely make the case, yeah, whatever, I'll just play really low owned, really good high upside plays. But there are a lot of hitters I like on this slate that are relatively low owned that are not hitting directly into 20-mile-an-hour winds against Jacob Mizorowski. Dodgers facing the Rockies in Colorado, about a 4.5 total for the Rockies, about 7.5, give or take, for the Dodgers. Shohei Ohtani pitching for the Dodgers. Tanner Gordon going for the Rockies. $4,300 price tag on Gordon as DraftKings continues to push the limit on how low they will go on Rockies starting pitching. Still doesn't look very good. He projects for like 5 points. So even at $4,300 and no ownership, I still do not have Tanner Gordon in lineups. Shohei Ohtani getting 37% ownership. I'm getting to 30%. He's not going more than 5 innings, but he should give you 4 to 5 innings. And it's obviously a good strikeout spot against Colorado, other than the fact it's in Coors Field lowers that a little bit. But the main thing here is that Ohtani is $7,500. So we have him as the, I believe, second highest projected pitcher on the slate. Other places have him as, I believe, the highest. I don't feel super strongly either way. I'm pretty comfortable saying he's one of the highest projected pitchers on the slate. He's only 7,500. Maybe you don't have that true, 30 plus ceiling because he's probably just not allowed to go deep enough into the game to get it unless he just strikes out, 10 dudes in 5 innings. But on this slate, I kind of doubt that you need that anyway. And especially at 7,500, you're not talking about a 10K Ohtani where if he scores 18 DraftKings points, you're probably not thrilled. You're talking about a 7,500 Ohtani where he was 7,200 yesterday as a batter. So it's kind of like they just forgot he was pitching. So Ohtani, I think, looks very, very good here. Likely to be one of my highest owned pitchers and probably the highest owned pitcher for the field. And I think that he should be. For the bats, starting on the Dodgers side, once again, likely to be the highest owned team on the slate for very, very, very obvious reasons. 32% projected ownership coming into Mookie, Smith, Freeman, 25 to Hernandez, 22 to Pages, 20 to Freeland, 12 to 13 on Conforto and Rojas. One negative here. The obvious negative is that you can't roster Shohei Ohtani as a hitter. So if you're going to Dodgers bats, you don't get to roster the best one. The bigger problem with that is it's just one less potential combination for your Dodgers stacks. Ted said Mookie is out, so that is good to know. Thank you for that. I was going to say I'm only getting 5% of him, but I guess now I'll get 0%. So the Dodgers have Ohtani, Smith, Freeman, Hernandez, Pages, Conforto, Freeland, Rojas, Kennedy. So it's the projected lineup that I had, except you have Kennedy over Betts. Obviously, that makes the lineup cheaper. It also makes the lineup worse, at least theoretically. Mookie Betts has been very bad this year, but it's still Mookie Betts. But the issue, in addition to just not having the best hitter on the Dodgers in your stacks, it does lower the combinations you can make with the Dodgers. So you are talking about this team that is getting a bunch of ownership to every player in the lineup. And now you only have 8 different ways that you can, 8 different not 8 different combinations, but 8 different players that you can mix into your stacking combinations. That does just make their, for lack of, I guess, relative ownership, we'll call it, even higher, from a combinatorial standpoint. So that is a negative there. to not being able to get to Ohtani outside of the obvious. Once again, right now, I'm getting to the Dodgers, but kind of at a rate of like half the field. And that's sort of what we've seen so far on the more popular offenses. I was around half the field on the Braves. I'm around half the field on the Dodgers. I was around half the field on whatever other, the Twins, I think it was. No, Rays maybe. There was some other team getting ownership that I was like half the field on. Kansas City. So I'm fine with that. Like if it's allowing me to get, more of the Yankees, more of the A's, high upside spots that maybe don't project quite as well point per dollar, but that absolutely can hit tons and tons of home runs. I'm fine with that. But clearly there's risk. Like the less Dodgers you have, the riskier it is because they are the highest projected team by a mile. They are the highest projected hitters. So there are good Dodgers teams you can make. There are plenty of good teams you can make without the Dodgers. It really just comes down to how you personally want to attack the slate. Will Smith, when I ran lineups, was my highest owned Dodger, 5,800 at catcher. Alex Freeland, I was getting 15%. I was getting 21% of Smith. I had 12% Freeman, 11% Hernandez. Will Smith being 5,800 does make that Shea Langolier pivot a little bit more interesting too. Not that I think Langoliers is, super low owned. I think I had him at like 8% or something, but I think it does kind of lock in, or at least make me a little bit more confident that he is going to be relatively low owned, because clearly people are going to click Will Smith for $200 more or whatever it was than Shea Langoliers. So it's always kind of nice when you get an actual direct pivot. Because like if you make Langoliers 4,500, you're a little bit more at risk of the field. What if the field all collectively decides the Dodgers are too popular and they decide Shea is the pivot? Like obviously that could still happen here, but it's a lot harder for people to just like go to the same price tag and click the worst play than it is to go to a different price tier and do it. Moving over to the Rockies bats here against Ohtani, over the field by a little bit, but not making or breaking my night. 12% Hunter Goodman at 4% owned, 11% Tyler Freeman at 4% owned, 9% Tovar at 3%. And then I drop down to 4% Moniak and go down from there. Ohtani's clearly a good pitcher. He's one of the most talented pitchers on the slate. You get 4 innings of bullpen, probably give or take, behind him. Not the most appealing thing in the world. And most importantly, the Dodgers or the Rockies suck. But at the same time, they are a 5% or less owned team in Coors Field. There's always going to be some appeal to that. And then also, for what it's worth on this slate, you have a lot of mediocre pitching. You have a lot of offenses in decent spots. There's actually only 2 offenses right now, I believe, with team totals above 5. One obviously being the Dodgers, the other being the Braves. Other than that, you just have like an entire slate of team totals between 4 and 5. Rockies are coming in around 4.5. So they're not like, it's not one of these slates where if you're going to the Rockies to be contrarian, you're going to the lowest team total on the slate, coming in at like 3.5 or something. They are pretty comparable to most other teams. The difference still, though, is that most other teams, even if that is their run total, like if you want to call that their median outcome, they have better hitters that make it more likely that when they do exceed that total, it's via home run. Whereas for the Rockies, the percentage of when they exceed that total, the percentage of the time that it's via 5 home runs is going to be lower than for like the Yankees, for example, obviously, because none of the Rockies, or very few of the Rockies, have legitimate home run power. Cincinnati taking on the Angels in Anaheim, 4.5 to 5 total for the Angels, about 4.5 for the Reds. For the Angels, we have Yusei Kikuchi on the mound. For the Reds, we have Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez getting 6% ownership at $6,900. I'm not getting to him. If you want to go there because the Angels strike out a lot, Nick Martinez isn't the worst pitcher on the planet. Fine. He's low owned. He's cheap, whatever. Hope for the best, but I'm not getting there. The one that I am getting to, which I'm always getting to, it seems like, and I don't want to, but also I get it, is Yusei Kikuchi at 8,500. He's right now only projected for 13% ownership. As a result, I'm getting to like 37%. It's not safe. I don't feel good about it. I also don't think any pitcher on this slate is particularly safe. And I do like that he's not getting a ton of ownership. The price tag is reasonable at 8,500. I do like that you're getting De La Cruz from his weaker side of the plate. So that's nice. It is an entirely right-handed lineup with the exception of TJ Friedl leading off. So far this season, Kikuchi has allowed a 210 expected ISO with a 22.8% strikeout percentage against righties compared to a 102 expected ISO, 29% strikeout percentage against lefties. This is a very dangerous spot for him. It is a tough, it's a good park for power. It's a Reds lineup that doesn't have the best power hitters, but it still has, competent hitters. So kind of similar to the Bailey Ober spot. Obviously, the pricing isn't quite as appealing on Kikuchi, but the strikeout stuff is better. It's still a scary spot to get to Kikuchi. Hopefully I'm getting into some Reds like I was the A's. I certainly wouldn't mind that. Flipping over to the bats, I am not getting to the Reds like I was the A's, which kind of sucks. I don't have much of the Reds at all. Mostly they're not getting too much ownership. 11% projected ownership to Miguel Andujar, who's batting cleanup. I got like 2% of him. 3% Friedel was my highest owned guy. But 11% ownership coming into Andujar. He's 3,800, third base outfield eligible, batting cleanup. I think that's a good value. He's not the most exciting hitter, but he does put the ball in play. He is in a good park for offense, and he is facing a pitcher that doesn't do a great job of limiting quality contact against him. So I do think that's a good value. De La Cruz getting 7%. I mentioned that he's on the wrong side of his platoon split. He's still a massive upside guy if you can find the $5,600 salary. Spencer Steer getting 7%. Most other guys getting 4 to 5. I like the Reds here from a value standpoint and an upside standpoint. They're just not in my lineups, but definitely a team that, I think should be on like your short list of teams to consider, especially like if you're someone playing a few lineups and you're coming into the slate and let's just say you don't want to play the Dodgers, or let's say like you don't want to play the Dodgers or the Braves, and so you're going to go from there. I think the Reds should be on, your list of teams that you really consider, just given that they're getting ownership, but not tons of it. They are affordably priced. Nobody other than De La Cruz is over 5K. Like, I think I still would rather get to the A's. But the Reds, I think from a value upside per dollar standpoint, I guess, are pretty interesting just given the park and the matchup. But I personally do not have them much at all right now. I'm a little surprised they're not a little more popular. I assume a lot of the reason I don't have much of them is just how much Kikuchi I have. On the A's or the Angels side, I am getting to them against Martinez. The field is kind of there. 13% Zach Neto, 11% Mike Trout for the field. Everyone else projected like 5 to 7%. I'm getting to the Angels pretty heavily. 23% Neto, 18% Trout, 17% Adele, and then 5 to 10% of the rest of the lineup, basically. Nick Martinez is not a terrible pitcher. He's not a great pitcher. He's kind of just a guy. 13.5% strikeout percentage against righties is obviously well below average. 152 expected ISO is pretty good. So you get kind of a weird matchup where he is facing a team that strikes out a lot and has a lot of power. And he's a pitcher that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but also doesn't give up a ton of power. So we'll see which side wins out. I think, like I said before, you could make the case to play Martinez at lower ownership. He threw 63 pitches last time out, but that was because he got crushed by Milwaukee. He threw 94 pitches the outing before that. So, I think you could make that case of, well, what if the low K guy just gets more strikeouts because that's what the Angels do? But you can also make the case of, what if the Angels hit a bunch of home runs because all they do is strike out or hit the ball hard, and they're facing a guy that lets them hit the ball hard. The Angels lineup, I did not have it when I ran lineups, but mentioned in chat that Rengifo's hitting second. So, yeah, I didn't have him in the projected lineup. He is cheap at 2,900, second base, third base. That is a good value, even though obviously he's not the best hitter in the world. He does have the platoon advantage against everybody because he's left-handed. He does have some speed. The bottom of the order, you have Nico Cavadas and Teodosio. Not the most exciting hitters down there. You have d'Arnaud instead of Ohapi. That does actually lower the strikeouts in the Angels lineup without sacrificing power too much. d'Arnaud does have power. He strikes out a lot less than Ohapi. Other than that, no Sean Newell, but Neto, Trout, Ward, Moncada, Adele, all in the lineup, all significant power bats there. The Angels, collectively as an offense are not great, but 228 expected ISO for Neto against righties, 260 for Trout, 216 for Ward, 217 for Moncada, 287 for Adele, only 167 this season for d'Arnaud. That's still fine for a catcher. In the past, though, he's been higher than that. I believe, 163 since last year. So probably just, kind of where he's settling in at now, but that's still solid power for a catcher. And then you get some stolen base upside too with guys like Zach Neto. So I personally like the matchup better for the Reds, I think, but there is more raw power in the Angels lineup. San Francisco taking on the Padres in the final game of the night. JP Sears for the Padres. For the Giants, we have Landon Rupp. Rupp getting 4% ownership at 7,900. I'm not getting to him. He's low owned, which is nice, but it is a tough strikeout matchup here against the Padres. He is outside of San Francisco, which, is a park downgrade pretty much by default. JP Sears on the other side, only $6,500, getting 32% ownership. I have 24%. I think he's pretty clearly one of, if not the best, point per dollar, like SP2 options on the slate. The opportunity cost at the position isn't super high today. I think he looks good, or as good as JP Sears can ever look. I would certainly like him more if this game were in San Francisco, but the Giants are not a particularly good offense overall. They have one of the lowest totals on the slate. Both sides of the Cubs game are lower, and then they're pretty much neck and neck with the White Sox. So they do have one of the lower totals. Josh said Giant stack for leverage. I do think you can go there for leverage. They're outside of San Francisco, which is nice. It is a park upgrade for power, and JP Sears is not good. Like, he's a good point per dollar projected pitcher. He is not a good pitcher in the context of pitching. So I do think, on this slate where you do have so many similar looking offenses in larger field tournaments, the Giants do make sense. I haven't looked yet to see if I'm getting to them, but JP Sears this season against righties, 20% strikeout percentage, 206 expected ISO, 322 expected WOBA. He's been fine as far as, limiting guys getting on base and limiting production overall, but he does give up power. And you do have some decent bats in this Giants lineup, which I don't think we actually have yet. But Elliot Ramos, probably leading off. Willie Adames, probably batting cleanup from the right side. Casey Schmidt is cheap. Rafael Devers, lefty, but it is Rafael Devers. He always has upside naturally. So if you want to go that route, I do think it makes some sense. And I am actually getting there, at least a little bit. 5% ownership projected to Casey Schmidt and Elliot Ramos is the high mark for the field. I have 15% Schmidt, 13% Ramos, 12% Adames, 9% Devers, 7% cost, 5% or less of everyone else. It's always nice when the guys that, before I look, I name that I would be most interested in are the ones that I'm getting the most of. But it's just favorable pricing. You get negative correlation against Sears. 3,400 on Schmidt with MPE, 3,900 on Ramos, 4,400 on Adames. This is definitely one of those spots that I talk about when you look at the pricing too, where not that it's impossible on an 8-game slate, but when you make JP Sears $6,500 and then you make the entire Giants lineup outside of Adames and Devers less than 4K, and you give the Giants the park upgrade going into Petco, and you think about the type of pitcher that Sears is, where he gives up power to righties, there's a very high chance that one side of this matchup is just useful, at least, a couple bats, obviously no guarantee that like 5 guys from the Giants do well, but if $6,500 JP Sears ends up not being, not necessarily the best play, but at least like a play that can be in a contending lineup at 6,500, like that's such a low bar. If he doesn't clear that bar, it's hard to think that like some combination of very cheap Casey Schmidt, Elliot Ramos, Willie Adames, other guys, that maybe aren't as appealing but are free, like Kyler Fitzgerald is 2,800, cost is 2,900. Like, how are none of these guys good plays if JP Sears is also not a good play outside of like JP Sears getting hurt and then the bullpen shutting down the Giants? But the bullpen here is a big negative as far as the Giants go. Padres do have a very good bullpen behind Sears. So this is a spot where like and I guess this is probably the answer to like, how is neither one good? JP Sears goes 5 innings, gives up 3 runs, none of them are home runs, strikes out 2 guys, and then the bullpen is just nails. Like, that is probably the answer to like, how do you just not want either side of this game if it does happen that way? But from an upside standpoint, it's very obvious that there is upside for the right-handed bats, or the bats in general on the Giants, particularly the righties, but that's pretty much everybody other than Devers. And then point per dollar value on Sears at the very least. So to recap, to wrap this one up, I'll go through the players I was getting to. As a reminder, I didn't have a lot of lineups before the show, so everything will change. But highest projected guys on the screen as well. I'm refreshing now so you can get an up-to-date view of that. For my player exposures, I was getting to Kikuchi, Ober, Otani, Sears, and Waldrop the most. I was also over the field by a pretty good amount on Schlittler. At catcher, getting to Will Smith, Shea Langoliers, Hunter Goodman. At first base, Nick Kurtz, Freddie Freeman. I was getting to Bush, but I'm going to end up lowering that a little bit. Rafael Devers, probably coming in third. At second base, Jazz, Semien, and Albies. At third base, but also Rengifo probably pops up for me once I rerun things. At third base, Vargas, McMahon, and Freeland. Shortstop, getting to Neto, Lee, and Adames. And then in the outfield, getting to Trout, Adele, Judge, Ramos, Rooker as my top 5. Top stacks for me right now. I was pretty flat overall, but top 5 stacks as far as total exposure: Dodgers, A's, Yankees, Angels, and Giants. Top 5-man stacks: A's, Yankees, Giants, Angels, and Braves. So the Dodgers for me were a lot of smaller stacks, it looks like. Home run pick, I went with him yesterday and he had like 21 points, but no home runs. But I'm going to go right back to Nick Kurtz. He is second in our home run projection. He has, I think, an exceptionally good matchup against Bailey Ober. I love Nick Kurtz here, and that's my home run pick again. Thank you for checking out the show. Don't forget to sign up for our NFL products using the link in the description below and the promo code EARLYBIRD to get 15% off. Thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. All that stuff helps out a lot. Thanks again, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.